fix the legal immigration problems that we have, including a guest worker program, which I think is a necessity for America's future. First of all, even if this plan before the Congress was the greatest idea ever, we simply can't afford it. It should cost too much money, and this nation is not in a position it'll bankrupt the country. The second thing I said is that it has it backwards. And the solution to our health insurance problem in America is not for the federal government to go and open an insurance company. The solution lies in empowering the consumer. Right now, every product we buy, from the shoes you have on to the car you drive, is something you buy on the basis of value. You in essence say, this is how much it costs, this is how good the product is, and you do a cost-benefit analysis. Not with healthcare. In healthcare, you're largely put into a pool by your employer. You are sold along with hundreds of thousands of other people by insurance companies who go to providers and say, look at these lives we control. We will send these people to you if you agree to pay us less. And the consumer has no role to play whatsoever. I mean, you may get to pick your primary care physician, what have you, but by and large, the consumer has no choice. Imagine a different system. Imagine one where you controlled your health care dollars, where you were able to take $600, $700, $800, whatever your employer wanted to put up, of tax-free money, and go into the market and say, okay, I am going to go out shopping for health insurance. Who wants me? And allow you to go out and buy health insurance on that basis. Now companies have to start competing against each other for your business. And now companies have to start offering value-added services. I see it now in Medicare Advantage, what my parents have. Medicare Advantage, to some extent, already often, they fight for, I don't know if you want, of course, Miami has a very high reimbursement rate, but they fight over Medicare Advantage patients. In the Medicare Advantage world, these patients, these companies are fighting with each other. So one company provides transportation, the other company provides whatever. I'd like to see that. I'd like people to be able to go out and buy their insurance in a vibrant private market. And we can do that with some changes to the IRS code and the creation of some alternative marketplaces in health insurance, which Florida, while I was Speaker, actually began doing. The reimbursement rate for Medicare Advantage in South Florida is among the highest in the country. So it makes that business model work here. That same business model in different parts of the state is not nearly as profitable. But you're right, it is a profitable model in Florida. And they do a good job because what these companies do, the best known example is Leon Medical Centers, and what they do is they basically bring the patient in as often as the patient wants to come in. And so, what they avoid is the patient becoming they manage the care of the patient intensely. My parents are in Leon, and there's intense management of the patient. My parents go to the clinic 3 times a week. There's a social component to that too, and they figured that out. But they avoid hospital stays. They're avoiding strokes that lead to debilitating. Obviously you're going to have them. These are older people, but that's where their reimbursement rate is higher in Miami for that service than it is in Palatka or Jacksonville. So that's part of the issue. Look, there is such a thing as malpractice. Okay, there are doctors that go in and commit malpractice, and there's got to be liability for that, particularly for economic damages. No one disputes that, I don't believe. I think the problem is that today too many lawsuits are not based on quality of care, they're based on the outcome. And I know you're a doctor and other people here may be involved in medicine. I'm not a doctor, but I watch Discovery Health Channel, so maybe that makes me ready. But you can take 2 patients, if I'm wrong, correct me. You can take 2 patients with the exact same condition, pretty much the same underlying health condition, overall health condition, treat them the exact same way and get 2 very different results. You just can't. And what happens is that if one of the patients has a negative outcome, not because the doctor did anything wrong, the doctor basically followed all the established protocols, you're now going to get sued because the outcome was bad. You're going to get sued, everybody who touched the patient's going to get sued, the hospital's going to get sued. And here's the catch. The catch is that more often than not, it is cheaper to settle that lawsuit than it is to take it to trial and win. And so now you've created this perverse incentive for people to file lawsuits in volume. And that's the problem with lawsuit abuse in America. Is the lawsuits are no longer on the basis of quality of care. They're basically based on the outcome. And that just can't be the reason why doctors get sued. Because what happens is, and here's where the downfall of all this is happening. Number one, less people are going to medical school because they figure out they can make more money in IT or some other industry than they can in medicine. Number two, those who are going to medical school are picking less stressful jobs. Less of them are going into neurosurgery, less of them are going into OBGYN, more of them are going into plastic surgery and dermatology. Nothing against dermatologists and plastic surgeons, but my point is that there are lifestyle choices being made as well in the choice of where medical graduates are going that are going to lead to chronic shortages in some of the most important fields in all of medicine. So look, people, yes, if a doctor's committed malpractice, you should be able to recover the economic damages of that loss. Pain and suffering is something completely different. That should be limited. But we'd have to have some level of control on this perverse incentive that exists to file lawsuits simply on the basis of outcomes. I don't believe that raising tax rates will ultimately lead to the revenues in the long term. This country needs to pay off the deficit. The deficit is important, not in its total dollar figure, but in fact, excuse me, I keep losing my voice. Where the deficit really comes into play and becomes very important is as a percentage of your gross domestic product. In essence, what percentage of your overall economy is composed of government spending, in particular deficit spending? And that's the part we got to get under control. We got to make. We've already blown past Japan, and we're moving towards Western Europe at a rapid pace, or even blown by them and moving to some other nations. And we need to. That's the piece of the pie that has to be shrunk. The percentage of the overall economy that is comprised of government deficit spending in particular. To do that, you have to do two things. Number one, you got to hold the line on spending. You've got to say from now on, going forward, whether it's a Gramm-Rudman type measure or something else, the federal government will not be allowed to spend money it doesn't have. This is the revenue you take in. This is what you must spend in this fiscal year. You can move it around any way you want, but this is how much money you have to spend this year. You can't spend more than your revenues bring in. And the second thing you have to do is you have to be able to say going forward, what that will do, I believe, number one, is it'll lead to an overall growth in the economy. That will be a good sign that will encourage people to invest. That will grow the overall economy, which, by the way, will grow revenues into government, but will also shrink the percentage of your deficit that's comprised of. So you've got to get a hold of the growth in government spending. The second step you've got to be able to do is roll back some of these spending cuts, these spending programs that have been put into place. The truth is that over the last year, the deficit has grown so rapidly that some of the cuts aren't going to be that hard. I mean, because they're just recent additions in there. But you are going to have a serious talk in this country about entitlement reform. There's no way around it. No one wants to discuss it. It's the third rail of politics. I believe in the line in the sand theory, where at some point you've paid into the system for so long that you're entitled to Medicare as it exists, or Social Security as it exists. But I'm telling you right now, I'm 38. I have no problem with a line in the sand that says anyone under 40, you're going to have a different Social Security system and a different Medicare system, and it's not going to be the one your parents had because it's not sustainable. And that's a conversation we need to have in this country sooner rather than later. And you cannot roll back spending in government or bring our fiscal house under control without entitlement reform in Social Security and Medicare. Those are the two biggest parts of our budget. Everything else is, stuff. But that's the two biggest threats to the future fiscal state of our country. Common criminals target you. Enemy combatants target the nation. The people who blew up those towers in 9/11 or brought down that airplane in Pennsylvania or attacked the Pentagon, they weren't attacking the passengers on those airplanes or the people in those towers. I mean, those were victims, but that's not who they intended to hurt. Who they intended to attack was the United States. And so I think you look at these things and say, who was the intended target? If I leave this elevator today and someone runs up behind me, hits me over the head and takes my wallet, that's a criminal because I was their target. On the other hand, if God forbid someone detonates a dirty bomb in downtown Miami tonight, the intended target is not the city of Miami, it's the United States of America. And that makes them enemy combatants in a war against terror. And there's a reason why we have military tribunals when we try enemy combatants, because there are all sorts of very good reasons, including compromising national defense, including the fact that you're asking civilians to try someone for crimes in a war, which is very different from crimes in a street, etc. So, here's the ridiculous part of it. I mean, so basically from now on, if we were to capture Osama bin Laden, we have to read him his Miranda rights? We have to tell him he has a right to remain silent? I mean, first he won't understand it. And second of all, you get my point, it's absurd. They are enemy combatants.
Marco, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Likewise. Thank you.